on behalf of the Institute for Leadership and Strategic Foresight. Welcome to So You Want to Be the Chief, a podcast for leaders.
Well, I have a special guest on the show today who I don't think we've ever met. Now, we know each other on social media or whatever, on Facebook and everything. And he recently retired as a Chief Master Sergeant. And I thought, that's interesting. I've been retired 23 years, I think, something like that. So I don't even remember retiring. But anyway, Chief Master Sergeant retired. Alan, is it Wary?
Weary, just like you're tired. Yeah, I grew up
Weary.
getting poked at all the time. Yeah, are you
Yeah.
feeling weary? Yeah, it's weary. Yeah, so
Yeah, well, good to meet you, Chief, and congratulations on your retirement. Just
thank you.
like a month ago, was it? Or
Yeah, my official retirement was on 1 January. I did about
okay.
25 years and 4 months altogether.
Yeah, okay. And they were good months
They were, yeah. I mean,
or years altogether. I mean, that's a
yeah,
lot of
yeah, yeah. I felt like I had I think everybody's experience is their own, but
yeah,
I have zero complaints, tremendous amount of lessons learned,
yeah,
I am
yeah.
who I am today because of it and made a tremendous impact, not just to airmen in our nation, but, through my family, through
Yeah.
relationships. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to kind of sharing a little bit about that journey,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah,
and,
well,
uh, you know,
I just had lunch with one of my pastors, or breakfast yesterday, and we got to talking about because I just celebrated 53 years the 1st of February. That's how long it was, 1972. And we were talking about why we stayed and all that kind of stuff. And I said something that I say often, but I'm not sure that it's true. But at the 3 year point, I was out. This sucks. They want me to shave. They want me to keep my hair short. They want, all of that kind of stuff. That was just un-American to ask a young, what I would have been 25 years old, and I was done with it. I was done with it. 50 years later, I retired from the Air Force. So, did you go through that? Do you
yeah,
think that's
I
true that we
did.
do that?
So, I guess my perspective was shaped a little bit differently just based on my past. My father was an airman. His father was Army Air Corps. And so even though I didn't know my grandfather as much, and my father's career was cut pretty short, he was a Vietnam airman. And so early on, there were some really just psychological things that drove to a medical retirement.
Oh,
But nevertheless, he retired out of Holloman Air Force Base. And so
oh,
I was exposed to the Air Force. I mean, Holloman was a huge part of Alamogordo. So most of my friends' families, parents were serving in the military, and you always had that reminder, right? I remember seeing the F4, then the F-15,
yeah,
then the F-117, and even being stationed there in my career. And so part of that was I was introduced to the Air Force culture just because of association with friends, and then it's a base in a military community. What shaped me is really the first Gulf War. I remember being in high school during that time frame, and because Alamogordo did have the premier weapon system in that time with the stealth, there was this revolving door when the whole entire base would deploy. And I would see the impact on families, on the community. It would really like a ghost town.
yeah.
So I joined a little bit later. Life started really kind of, I would say, early with me. I had a kid right out of high school. I was married in high school. And so I looked at the Air Force really as an option. I always had wanted to serve, but I was really shaped at the fact that I didn't want to be away from family because at that point, right, Saddam was poking his head up and then back down. And so there were a lot of these brush fires out in the Middle East. So I joined at the age of 26, and we can kind of get into that. But I came in with a different perspective, really with an opportunity to kind of come in. I knew what I was getting into. I was really committed to being part of the mission. But you're right, I was down just for one enlistment. I was
Yeah.
going to come in, finish school, really establish a good technical skill set. And I came in as a biomedical equipment repair technician and then be out. So early on, I think the challenge for me was I was 26 years old as an airman, really in an environment where much of my peers were teenagers.
Yeah.
And so I didn't necessarily have that peer group and that camaraderie. So I was all about the business, all about really executing the mission, learning my job. But I never really felt like I was part of really the culture or the tribe. My turning point was really back in 2000, I would say 2002 timeframe, 2001. I was selected to be the proffer for the Air Force cross ceremony for Senior Airman Jason Cunningham. And so, right, 9/11 had kicked off, right? Many events had happened. And so being up on that stage and hearing really the testimonies at the time, General Jumper was presiding over that, Secretary Roche, and then right then our Chief Master in the Air Force was Chief Murray. And so I really felt that I wanted to be a part of something that resonated and to carry on the legacy that Jason had been a part of and given his life. And that was something just kind of clicked on.
Mm.
It clicked on because at that point, right, I knew my job well. I was a good airman, but I really hadn't necessarily truly understood, I think, ultimately that ethos, that profession of arms that we enlisted into.
Yeah.
And at that point, I said, this is going to be a career. Had some different things that we can get into after that that really kind of shaped my perspective and learning and growing.
Yeah.
But that was really my pivot point.
Well, and you being more mature than the average young man, airman, uh, it seems to me like you were at least expected to be more of a leader. Would
I
that be
was,
true? Yeah.
yeah,
And
really from
you
day
know, we
one.
argue and we'll argue forever whether leaders are born or made. I argue that there are many leaders who are born. Everybody says
Yeah.
they're made. No, not everybody, because I've known several 3 stars, 4 stars who were not leaders. They were great managers, but not leaders. So you can't, say, and they got a lot of training. But anyway, so was that something that fit your identity? That I mean, you kind of, with that age gap, you kind of
It
forced
did. Yeah.
into
I
this.
had come in with, I felt a tremendous amount of just blessing in my life and opportunities to grow as a leader. Really being a young parent, I didn't really have I would say, the opportunity to kind of sit back and think, what do I want to lean into? And so I knew a part of just, the success of being a parent and providing for a family was the fact that there was a lot of grit, a lot of resolve, the ability really to kind of shape my perspective. And so I started right out of high school with Sears. Sears took a vested interest in me back when Sears was kind of a big deal.
Hmm.
And I was a warehouse supervisor going to school at night. And so I would work during the day, go to school at night. And it was just kind of wash, repeat, kind of spend time with the family. And then Sears closed a bunch of their stores in the early, really in the, I would say the mid 90s. And at that point, they wanted me to stay with the company. And they moved me to Arizona. And so I became a operations manager there. And so I say that because I really had to understand people. Most of what had gotten me through was right. I had a respect for people. My parents instilled a lot of values and a great work ethic, but I realized that leadership was very temperamental. And so I thought, I need to understand ultimately what are we trying to accomplish? Who works for me? Why do they work here? All right, is this a long-term gain? Are they looking for a profession and a career? Is this kind of a stopgap while they're going to school? Or I had a lot of older people that worked for me that were really trying to supplement Social Security. And so I really started to learn people and dynamics and how to communicate. Jumped around with Sears for a little bit. Ended up getting divorced when I was out in Vegas and then moved back to New Mexico and started with Enterprise Rent a Car. So I'd been exposed to a lot of leadership, a lot of management experience and opportunities that were really customer focused and facing. When you're dealing with a customer, there's a different dynamic as well. So when I chose to join the Air Force, it was really out of the fact that I kept hitting a lot of different barriers because I didn't have my degree. And I was really at the point I could progress with enterprise, but as I wanted to go into different jobs, the degree really was a barrier. Matter of fact, when they hired me initially, when I interviewed with them, they said no because I didn't have a bachelor's. And so I wrote the actual regional vice president a letter. I knew the area. I was back in southern New Mexico. I knew the culture. I knew the customer. I had had a tremendous amount of opportunities, right, to lead retail and operations. And so he took a chance on me.
Hmm.
So I was grinding out at school, realized, yeah, retail really wasn't what I wanted. I wasn't any further along with school because I was kind of a workaholic. And my father's like, maybe you should join the Air Force. And I'm like, I'm not joining the Air Force at 26 years old. Yeah. So we kind of talked about it. I talked to the recruiter, but you're right. Right as I came out and I entered into basic training, just because of my competencies, my intellect, my confidence, my age, I was put into a leadership role. I was a dorm chief. Yeah, the TI
Oh,
came up and said, "You're
yeah.
going to be my dorm chief until I
Yeah.
fire you." And I'm happy to say that I was the dorm chief the entire time in basic training. But
My good.
it was a great opportunity. And even though I had a young, I think my TIs were probably my age or maybe a little bit younger. That's back when we had senior airmen. So I had
Hmm.
senior airmen, Stanley and Tech Sergeant Fisher. But they taught me a lot. And they said, look, this flight really succeeds because of you. And so each night when I was in basic, I would have to write an after action report on how I felt the actual flight performed during that day. What really was the temperament of the flight? What are different things, right? When I looked at morale, what could we improve on? And so it was really about people. But, and then even on in through tech school, my tech school was a year long. So a lot of opportunities in tech schools to be a leader as well.
Yeah. Wow. and then eventually we gave you the stripes of a leader, right? So were you a
Yeah.
fast burner then, or
Yeah,
just about average?
it was interesting, right? Our promotion system has changed so much,
Yeah,
even since I came in 99, versus even when you came in, right? And so, as I think the Air Force did the right thing when they looked at, we're going to grow the force, and part of it growing the force, right, it increased that delta of airmen that were coming in. And so I think just because the system is built, right, on a percentage of NCOs and airmen and the relationship that our NCOs have, and in position to lead those airmen, we started promoting at some really large, percentages.
right.
And so, I made staff fairly quickly. I always looked at, does does my ability to get promoted represent what I produce throughout our weighted airmen's promotion system? And so I studied my butt off. And I used to ask myself what I would have made it if we were promoting at 20% or 19%. But
Uh,
nevertheless, I always thought that I did really well in preparing myself. My evaluations, I thought were very, I would say, comprehensive in the sense of what I'm doing in the job, connecting with airmen, really showing those competencies outside of just really having a technical toolbox. And so I made staff fairly early, I think around the 3.5 year point.
okay.
Took me twice to make tech back then, and then twice to make master. And then I made senior the first time. And so each of those times, right, we were really still doing a lot of WAPS testing. If there were PDG, or SKT
Right.
up until a particular point, we were still looking at time and service, time and grade. And so I was a fan of really where we were going with trying to kind of shape, the amount of talent that was coming up, but that they weren't being hamstringed or handicapped, just because a few maybe folks in front of them had been in a little bit longer. And so Chief took me the longest. I think I had three opportunities, right, that the Air Force gave me to make chief, and I made it on that third opportunity.
Mm,
Part of that was I was in a really small career field. And I think that was the challenge, right, and the opportunity growing up as a biomed equipment repair technician, a 482, is across the Air Force, that career field only was about 470 folks.
is
And
that right?
so,
Oh,
we were
wow.
promoting maybe two to three folks to senior master sergeant each year. For the longest time, we would only get one to chief. And so it was interesting because you saw some folks that were just ready. I mean, they knew how to lead. They were there representing the competencies and the potential of a chief to be able to
Uh,
operate really at the high levels, but the cutoff. And so, because it was such a small career field, there were times, Chief, that we had folks that were not getting promoted with 435, 427 board scores. And that's
yeah.
crazy, right? And so you'd
Uh,
lose a lot of good folks because they're like, look, I'm doing my best to showcase my
uh,
talent.
uh,
And so I'm a big fan that the service really needs to look at how do we really across medical wise, what can we do to maybe combine light career fields? I think
yeah.
that some of those career fields are still big enough that you're going to get some chiefs to fill those functional roles. Like I said, I grew up as a biomed guy, a 4A. We have 4AOs, which are a larger career field, and then your logistics folks, 4A1s. I'm
Yeah.
a fan of really looking at how do we maybe combine those.
Yeah.
Because, once we put on chief, I mean, we understand the system, I think, functionally and technically.
Right.
You're looking at really more how do we operate operationally and strategically.
Yeah. Now, do you, and this argument has been around a while. Uh, as a chief, and this is my perspective, as a chief, I was a chief. And then I was whatever I was doing because I had different
Right.
jobs, especially when I made chief. And some people say, no, I'm a medic chief. An ammo chief or whatever.
Yeah.
And my perspective is once you get to that point, especially that point, maybe even sooner, you should be able to go into any career field and at least manage, if not lead an
Right.
organization, because I think, we get the, well, for one thing, if that chief, and how long were you chief?
For a little over 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah, about six
So,
and a half years.
so for 6 years you held that, and I know it doesn't work out exactly that way, but you want new blood, you want young, uh, smarter. We
Yeah.
always say every generation is smarter than we ever were, and that's so that is true. But that way, I think you make the force better. That you get new blood in there, new ideas, new energy, and all that stuff. Because no, I think all of us get to that point where once we've been there for a little while, we stop progressing like we should, or like especially like we could. You know, it's up to you. It's always up to you. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, I think I don't know that we do that very well. That we should be what is it, success something in the big world, where you set up when I was coming up, our perception was, our perspective was, we work ourselves out of a job. We teach that senior how to be the chief, so I can go do something else. And I don't know that that's happening anymore. But
Yeah,
that way you keep it.
I think we're I love what the new chief is doing, right? General Alvin, along with Chief Master Sergeant Flossie and their perspective. I think when you look at where we're going, right, with foundational competencies across the Air Force and really being able to tangibly assess where folks are at when it comes to, how they are developing themselves, right, developing others, developing ideas, right, developing the organization. I don't know if we've taken that much of a comprehensive look. And I think that falls into some of the things that you're saying, Chief, is that, we measure so many folks by their functional outcomes. And as a chief, my job is really kind of to be operationally right, focused, but strategically minded.
Mm.
And I think that comes a little bit later down the road, unfortunately. There was always the argument going, well, why are you teaching senior airmen staff sergeants about national defense strategy, national security strategy, things that they don't know, they just need to know their job. But I think that's a mistake, because if we don't expose folks early on to the mission and the vision and really how they're postured in their warfighting stance to protect, then they're just going to be down and in most throughout their careers.
Yeah.
And so we have to kind of find a way to say, when we look at kind of I would say the continuum, right, or the life cycle of an airman, they come in and we're developing functionally and they're learning their job, that 3 level, that 5 level, that 7 level. But what we're also doing is we're also developing them institutionally as well. And so throughout, right, them doing their technical job, there's those touch points to where they're getting, whether it's pre-programmed or set, professional military education, they're doing some different things, right, with the development advisor at the local level, at the base, but they're learning how to articulate, they're learning how to connect things, they're learning the bigger picture, right, within this profession of arms and how doctrine is interwoven into that functional and technical toolbox. I think that the challenge is how do you evaluate that? And so naturally, right, whether you're a senior airman or you're a chief, you're going to gravitate to what you're comfortable with and that DNA that we've established in you. And, we call it a demand signal. And I think the demand signal has to diversify to where now when you get folks that are at that senior NCO level, they're not necessarily as comfortable with, the down and in, I still want to pull a toolbox. They're understanding the system and the system of systems and what are they looking to produce, and being able to identify, right, where there's variation in the system and be able to pull down, right, things at the strategic level and articulate that to leaders. But you're right, there's a large percentage of chiefs, and that's how they define themselves, through their functional badge
Right.
versus really as an airman, right, and a chief master sergeant in the Air Force. We're getting better at that. I think it's a difficult challenge, because think about it. Most of your senior NCOs are supervised and evaluated by officers. And I have total faith in our officers, but I think we need to educate our officers better in how they are evaluating their chiefs, when it comes to their understanding and competencies of understanding things really at a national strategic level and the overall system.
Yeah.
It can't just be, I got a great chief, it takes care of my airmen. Okay, but okay, great. We all take care of airmen.
Right.
Maybe a little bit differently sometimes, but how are those airmen prepared? And how is that chief informing the overall system to make sure those airmen have what they need?
Right, right. And having and some of the guests I've had on this program, having those conversations. I just talked to my old boss, '06 retired Fitzner, Colonel Fitzner, Kurt Fitzner, who we did have those conversations, about stuff like that. And we were in Germany together. So, and it's a little bit different, as you know, Chief, when you're overseas than when
Oh
you're
yeah.
stateside. It's a totally different dynamic. So we had plenty of conversations about these type of things, I don't think we've ever been overmanned. I don't remember ever being overmanned. So with the manning that we had, some of the things that maybe he as a commander should be doing, I did. because we didn't have enough. He wasn't big enough to be everywhere,
Right.
So I learned how to do some of that stuff with him. And again, those conversations were great. That Chief, this is what I expect. This is what I want. I don't know how to get it. Can you go get it? Sure, sir. We can. And we have different resources
Right.
than officers do. And I've been at the academy I served it for 20 years, and teaching youngsters how to be good officers. And I'm not sure that we don't teach them the enlisted part very well. They have no idea that what they're going to get. Now, I did write a book for them, and I hope they read it, but at least to know what we expect. But nonetheless, they got other stuff going on and expectations. So,
Well, you're right. There's a lot of career fields that are I call them tribal, and
yeah,
I
yeah,
look at that in the sense that, depending on kind of, how you want to define those tribal members in there, they grow up, I think, with a better kind of cohesion and understanding. You look at maintainers, a maintenance officer, right? A maintenance airman, NCO, they grow up together. You have this progression where, your maintenance officers are working side by side, in different roles with enlisted airmen. And then as they progress, and so there's milestones that they have to achieve as they progress in their career. Expediter, right? Pro soup, you know, different positions before they even be considered to make senior or chief. And
right,
so those officers understand those roles.
yeah,
But you get a lot of career fields that it's a melting pot, and you don't necessarily have that collective and that cohesion. And so I think there's challenges. You look at medical sometimes. You get a lot of professionals that come in, providers, right, nurses, very educated, very focused in on the patient. But there's not necessarily sometimes that ability to collectively kind of learn together and learn each other's kind of anatomy and physiology and what NCOs do
yeah,
in those particular roles.
right,
And then depending on really, the career field, a lot of airmen are still doing a lot of technical work, even as tech sergeants and master sergeants.
yeah,
I'll look at medical. You may have, a master sergeant that you sent to advanced school to be a MRI, right? CT tech, ultrasound
mm,
tech. And now what they're doing is they're taking care of the patient. They're still trying to find opportunities to lead and understand culture and mission and strategy, right? And that demand signal to push lethality and cyberability and mission success. But they're sometimes it's not, I would say, at the frequency, right, or the volume that they would like. And the next thing you know, they make senior,
mm,
they make chief. And they're put into these now senior enlisted leadership positions or these flight chief positions, or now they're a group chief or a squadron chief. And so the challenge is they necessarily haven't had the development opportunities to really understand culturally, right, how things, I would say, operate together, how officers are positioned, how to work with commanders. And you may have one chief within an organization that's trying to mentor them and shape them. And so, we got to figure out, right, how do we find opportunities for these airmen and these officers to understand each other, to understand what they need, right, from a stance of mission command and readiness. And it's not every AFSC is the same. Not every AFSC is the
right,
same.
right,
And I think those changes are being made now. I mean, I love what the Air Force is doing with warrant officers. I think now to have technical experts really from a managerial focus lens within certain technical career fields really frees up that chief to be able to look at operationally and strategically and some functional things in the sense of how we organize, train, and equip airmen. That I think chiefs were just overwhelmed in the past, going, right, I got all these SCL things and it comes with its
right,
own big kind of binder. I'm still focused on functional and readiness and then the people aspect of it. And my
yeah,
hope would be that the Air Force continues to look at that and then really reshape career fields in a way that says, right, if these are AFSCs that necessarily don't have the level of demand in a readiness or warfighting environment, then maybe those are things that we need to kick to the civilian world,
yeah,
to the civilian
yeah,
world.
yeah,
Because in the end, right, we have airmen, and airmen is a universal term. I remember I was a career assistance advisor, and we went through the big force shaping in 2014 timeframe.
mm,
There were a lot of airmen that at that time we weren't going to give a career job reservation to. And going back to what you had said, Chief, right, and folks being really, I think, identifying by their AFSC, there were some close calls, a lot of opportunities, and we lost a lot of airmen because they classified themselves by their AFSC rather than as an airman.
wow,
And so I would have 20 airmen that I talked to in one day that weren't getting an AFSC. They were number 50 or 60 on the list. The career field was giving out maybe two a month. And I'm like,
mm-hmm,
you're not going to get a CGR. You need to pick a career field to retrain into. No,
right,
no, I came in for this. I'd rather get out. And
Yeah.
then here they are with separation orders banging on the door, you know.
Right.
So I think you're right. Folks need to kind of understand is we're airmen. And I think part of that demand signal needs to go beyond just individualized meticulous requirements and your readiness skills verification and those competencies. We really need to define folks, I think, more in a more comprehensive way to be specific. And these are the things that you need to understand because you may not always be in that AFSC. You're gonna have a job, but it may be a different job than what you're doing today.
Right. Right. Now, to finish out, Chief, what's the most important thing for especially a new chief? The older ones, again, once you've been a chief a while, that's the way you are anymore. It's hard to change. But a brand new chief, which every month I guess we're getting brand new chiefs. What's the most important thing that brand new chief weary needs to know to do to excel?
What I would say is they really need to understand strategically what their leaders need to accomplish. I think, that they're there to execute strategy. They're there to be the main change agent for their boss. I think that's very important that they're doing that. And then really what they are is I call myself really a kernel whisperer, and so, and it's lonely up at that top. I think most importantly, they need to understand that they're not alone, that there's a network out there to be able to support them and that they need to find a network, to be able to bounce things off of. I know when I became a new chief, I looked across over to MSG, to MXG, right, to Ops Group, to folks down calling folks to say, hey, this is what I'm kind of doing right. Does it look right? And I think there's a level of vulnerability that they need to show. I mean, there's a lot of times where you end up in a position, you're like, I know I'm ready for this, but wow, I just don't feel prepared right now.
Right.
And so that's okay. I think doing kind of an honest assessment,
Mhm.
getting out and about, connecting with people, listening, but realizing that, you're at that operational strategic level and you have tactical warriors to be able to do the job. If you're trying to stay down and in all the time, then you're not being effective.
Yeah.
And so what I would really say the takeaway is really learn the environment, um, meet with your leaders below you, deliver those expectations, and then, continue to always communicate with your boss.
Yeah, yeah, and seek help.
Yep. Seek help, that mentorship.
I hear that from especially a lot of the older, well, the chiefs who were chiefs longer, that the youngsters don't want to talk to them. They don't want the wisdom that they have. We do gain wisdom by experience, if nothing else. So especially the young ones, find somebody, find Chief Weary, that old guy. Hey, by the way, you're no guy, just so you know, and
Yeah, I
ask
know. And
ask, how did you guys do it, or what worked for you, what didn't work for you? Because a lot of times I guess maybe there's a sense of pride. Yeah, it's pretty cool to make chief, but you still have to be humble. Those old
it,
chiefs know stuff that it's amazing what they know. Yeah, at least
what
in my case,
relationships?
yeah,
I mean,
relationship.
I mean, I think if you have no relationships, there's no impact.
Hmm.
And we talked about kind of the functional chief, right, and the functional mindset. There's a world outside of that building that you're in, and so you got to go and develop those relationships with those other organizations. That's really how you get things done. As a
Yeah,
med group chief, I'm looking at metrics all the time. I'm looking at what my boss is looking to achieve. I'm looking at, where we have gaps, but I'm not in that alone. I'm calling over to, other organizations going, hey, I need your assistance, right? Can you give me some feedback? This is what we're
right.
trying to achieve. I need your help here.
Yeah,
I think one of the most important things as well is you got to be that honest broker to your boss.
yeah.
It's the yin and the yang sometimes. You got to look at the back door to make sure that folks aren't trying to sneak in and drive their agenda.
Hmm.
You need to get involved with those other, whether you're at the squadron level, you need to be engaged with those flight commanders. Whether you're at the group, you need to be engaged with those squadron commanders as well.
Yeah,
On expectations, right? Your boss's agenda, right? Where you need their support, but you need to be able to go back and give that candid feedback to your boss.
right.
Never in public. I mean, my bosses have all had, they are airmen. Their temperaments have been aggressive at times, and that's
Hmm.
fine. I
Yeah,
think that it's temperament. It doesn't mean, right, those bosses don't care about you, but there are times where you got to go in going, hey, boss, this is what I sensed in this meeting,
yeah,
right? And this is where I think we lost a little bit of credibility and control.
right.
And this is the feedback that I want to make sure, right, that I'm on the same page. And when I leave that door, but what do you need from me? This is the recommendation that I have for you. I
Yeah,
think that's sometimes the hardest, for even chiefs to be able to convey is to be that honest broker to their
yep,
bosses.
yep.
You know, and I would say really another what chiefs need to understand is where they're at in the organization is their administration areas will make or break them. When I was an installation chief, what I found was that my CAG, my front office group, the wing staff agencies, they really are the central nervous system that allows us to operate. And so I think going back right to those particular levels, what are folks maybe in those similar areas that you can lean on that will help support you and feed you the information that you need?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Chief, thank you so much. I know as a retiree, you got to get out to play golf or what is that new little baby tennis that everybody plays?
Oh yeah, pickleball.
Pickleball. Yeah, I know you
Yeah,
guys,
yeah.
those of you who still have knees, go out there and do that. But thank you so much and your family for your service. I know I know you did some great stuff for us. I know you're going to do some great stuff in the community. Do you have a job now, or are you just going
I
to?
do, yeah. So
Okay,
I'm actually working for the University of Massachusetts Lowell. They brought me on to be their director of operations for their Applied Research Corporation.
cool.
It's a unique position. It sits right outside of Hanscom Air Force Base. And so seen a lot of airmen and warriors, that I
Yeah,
served with over the last 2 years.
yeah,
I didn't take too much time off because, I'm an empty nester. I got a girlfriend and, she's my heartbeat, and
yeah,
maybe a proposal coming soon, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
my kids are older. I got a 26-year-old, 32-year-old, three
Wow.
grandbabies, and so I got the flexibility to still spend some time with them.
Yeah.
But really, I landed in an opportunity to still have a very, very great mission that
Good,
still is going to impact people, and that's what I wanted to do.
good,
So,
good. Well, keep doing it, man.
all
Don't
right,
give up. Don't stop.
definitely. Well,
All
thanks, Chief.
right.
I really appreciate the time.
Thank you for being on the
All right,
show. God bless you.
all right, bye.